Marcus Chen never imagined that accepting a simple data analyst job at Quantum Dynamics would change his life forever. The 28-year-old computer science graduate had been unemployed for 6 months, watching his savings dwindle while sending out hundreds of applications. When the offer came through for a position at the mysterious tech company located in downtown Seattle, he didn't ask too many questions. The building itself was unremarkable from the outside, a glass tower that blended seamlessly with the city's skyline. But once Marcus stepped through the revolving doors on his first day, he sensed something different. The lobby was too quiet, the security guards too alert, and the employees moving through the space seemed to communicate in glances rather than words. His supervisor, Dr. Sarah Kim, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who spoke in measured tones. She led Marcus through corridors lined with frosted glass offices where he could see silhouettes of people working, but their activities remained hidden. The air hummed with an energy that went beyond typical office productivity. "Your job is straightforward," Dr. Kim explained as they reached his workstation. "You'll be analyzing data patterns from our various research projects. Look for anomalies, trends, anything that seems out of place. But Marcus," she paused, fixing him with an intense stare, "what you see here stays here. The confidentiality agreement you signed isn't just paperwork." Marcus nodded, settling into his ergonomic chair and powering up the dual-monitor setup. The first few weeks passed without incident. He analyzed datasets that seemed to involve everything from weather patterns to social media behavior, from financial transactions to traffic flows across major cities. The work was interesting enough, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was only seeing fragments of a much larger picture. It was during his third week that Marcus first noticed the shadow. He was working late, most of the office having emptied out by 7 p.m. The cleaning crew moved silently through the floors, and Marcus had settled into a rhythm of analyzing a particularly complex dataset involving cellular tower communications. That's when he saw it, a figure reflected in his monitor, standing behind him. Marcus spun around, heart pounding, but found only empty space. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the distant sound of traffic filtered through the windows. He was alone on the floor, or so it seemed. Shaking off the incident as fatigue-induced paranoia, Marcus returned to his work. But the feeling of being watched persisted. Over the next few days, he caught glimpses of movement in his peripheral vision, shadows that didn't match the positions of furniture or colleagues, and the distinct sensation that someone was reading over his shoulder. The breakthrough came when Marcus decided to test his theory. He deliberately left a specific file open on his screen before taking a bathroom break, noting exactly which line of code was visible. When he returned 5 minutes later, the file had been scrolled down several pages. Either his computer was malfunctioning, or someone had been at his desk. Marcus began paying closer attention to his surroundings. He noticed that certain employees seemed to move through the office with unusual purpose, their routes taking them past his workstation at regular intervals. He observed that some of his colleagues worked on projects that required access to databases he'd never heard of, using software that wasn't installed on his machine. The pieces began forming a pattern when Marcus accidentally accessed the wrong folder on the shared drive. Instead of the weather data he was expecting, he found files labeled with cryptic designations like Operation Nightfall and Shadow Protocol Gamma. Before he could explore further, his screen went black and rebooted automatically. Dr. Kim appeared at his desk within minutes, her usual composed demeanor slightly strained. "Having technical difficulties?" she asked, but her tone suggested she already knew what had happened. "Just a system glitch," Marcus replied carefully. "Lost about an hour of work." She nodded slowly, studying his face. "Marcus, you're doing excellent work here, very thorough, very observant. Those are valuable qualities, but sometimes curiosity can be problematic. I hope you understand." That evening, Marcus couldn't concentrate on his usual routine of Netflix and takeout. He found himself researching quantum dynamics online, but the company's digital footprint was remarkably thin. Their website featured generic corporate language about innovative solutions and cutting-edge research, but provided no specific details about their projects or clients. The more Marcus thought about it, the more questions arose. Why was the building's security so sophisticated for a research company? Why did some areas require special access cards that most employees didn't have? And why did he sometimes hear conversations in languages he couldn't identify echoing from the ventilation system? His breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, the night janitor, had been observing Marcus's late-night work habits. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who always greeted him warmly when their paths crossed. One evening, as she emptied his wastebasket, she leaned close and whispered, "Be careful, young man. This place has layers like an onion, and some layers make you cry." Before Marcus could respond, she had moved on, continuing her cleaning routine as if nothing had happened. But her words stayed with him, confirming his growing suspicion that quantum dynamics was far more than it appeared. The next morning brought a new assignment that would change everything. Dr. Kim handed Marcus an encrypted drive containing what she described as priority data requiring immediate analysis. The files were unlike anything he'd worked with before, complex algorithms that seemed to predict human behavior with unsettling accuracy. As Marcus delved deeper into the data, he realized he was looking at surveillance information. Not just digital footprints, but detailed profiles of individuals that included their daily routines, psychological patterns, and even predictive models of their future actions. The scope was staggering, thousands of profiles spanning across multiple countries. One file caught his attention because the name was familiar: James Rodriguez, a journalist who had been investigating corporate espionage. Marcus had read Rodriguez's articles about companies that gathered intelligence on private citizens. The profile contained information that could only have been obtained through extensive surveillance: Rodriguez's coffee shop preferences, his girlfriend's schedule, even his therapy appointments. Marcus felt a chill as the implications sank in. This wasn't just data analysis, it was intelligence gathering on a massive scale. And now he was part of it, whether he had realized it or not. The shadow he had been sensing wasn't paranoia. It was very real, and it belonged to people who were watching him just as carefully as they watched their targets. Marcus realized that from the moment he had walked into quantum dynamics, he had become both an asset and a potential threat. As he sat at his desk, staring at the glowing screens filled with other people's secrets, Marcus understood that he faced a choice. He could continue his work, collect his paycheck, and pretend he hadn't seen what he'd seen. Or he could dig deeper and risk discovering truths that might be too dangerous to know. The building around him hummed with its usual quiet activity, but now Marcus heard it differently. Every footstep, every whispered conversation, every electronic beep seemed to carry hidden meaning. He was no longer just an employee. He was an insider in an organization whose true purpose remained hidden behind layers of deception. Marcus saved his work and closed the files, but he knew there was no going back. He had glimpsed the shadow world that existed behind quantum dynamics' corporate facade, and that shadow had noticed him noticing. The deadly edge wasn't just about outsmarting others, it was about surviving the consequences of knowledge that some people would kill to protect. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to retreat to the safety of ignorance or step deeper into the darkness where secrets lived and breathed like living things. But tonight, as he packed up his things and prepared to leave the office, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was following him home. Marcus spent the weekend in his small Capitol Hill apartment, unable to escape the weight of what he had discovered. Every time he tried to focus on normal activities, cooking, reading, even watching television, his mind returned to those surveillance files. The faces in the profiles haunted him, ordinary people living their lives unaware that someone was cataloging their every move. By Monday morning, Marcus had made his decision. He would investigate further but carefully. He arrived at Quantum Dynamics with a plan to copy some of the files onto a personal drive, but when he attempted to access the encrypted folder, he found it had vanished from the system entirely. In its place was a new assignment: analyzing social media sentiment data for what Dr. Kim described as a consumer behavior study. The work seemed innocuous enough, tracking hashtag trends and engagement patterns across various platforms. But as Marcus dug into the data, he began to see the same sophisticated behavioral prediction algorithms he had encountered in the surveillance files. This wasn't market research, it was psychological profiling disguised as consumer analysis. During his lunch break, Marcus decided to test the boundaries of his access. He navigated through the company's internal network, using his legitimate credentials but exploring directories that weren't part of his usual workflow. What he found made his blood run cold. Hidden deep in the system was a database called Project Looking Glass. The files contained real-time surveillance data from major cities around the world. camera feeds, phone intercepts, financial transactions, even biometric data from public transportation systems. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. But it was the personnel files that truly shocked Marcus. His own profile was there, complete with psychological assessment, loyalty rating, and a note that read, "Subject shows high analytical capability but potential security risk due to excessive curiosity. Recommend close monitoring and gradual revelation of operational scope." They had been evaluating him from the beginning. Every conversation with Dr. Kim, every assignment, every seemingly casual interaction had been designed to assess his suitability for deeper involvement in whatever quantum dynamics really did. Marcus quickly closed the files and returned to his assigned work, but his hands were shaking. He was trapped in a web that had been carefully constructed around him, and his every move was being analyzed and catalogued. The question was whether he could find a way out before the web tightened completely. The answer came from an unexpected source. That evening, as Marcus prepared to leave the office, he found a small piece of paper tucked under his keyboard. The message was brief. "Coffee shop on Pine Street tomorrow 7 a.m. Come alone, a friend." Marcus stared at the note, his mind racing. Who else knew what he had discovered? Was this a trap, or was there someone else inside quantum dynamics who shared his concerns? The smart thing would be to ignore the message and continue playing his role as an oblivious employee. But curiosity and a growing sense of moral obligation drove him to accept the mysterious invitation. The coffee shop was a small, dimly lit place that catered to early morning commuters. Marcus arrived precisely at 7, ordering a black coffee and taking a seat near the window. He was about to give up when a woman approached his table, Maria Santos, the night janitor who had warned him to be careful. "You look surprised," Maria said, sliding into the seat across from him. "You thought I was just a cleaning lady." Marcus struggled to process this development. "I don't understand. How did you know about your little exploration yesterday?" Maria smiled, but her eyes remained serious. "Because I've been watching the Watchers for 3 years now. My name isn't really Maria Santos, by the way. It's Agent Catherine Price, FBI Financial Crimes Division." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're undercover." Deep cover? Quantum dynamics has been on our radar since 2020, when several of their research projects started showing up in connection with illegal surveillance operations. We've been trying to build a case, but they're very good at covering their tracks. Most of their employees have no idea what the company really does. Catherine leaned forward, lowering her voice. "But you've seen behind the curtain. The question is, are you willing to help us expose them?" Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. What would that involve? "Continue your work, but document everything you can access. We need evidence of their surveillance operations, client lists, financial records. Anything that proves they're violating privacy laws and potentially selling intelligence to foreign actors." The mention of foreign actors made Marcus's stomach clench. "You think they're involved in espionage?" "We know they are. Some of their clients are shell companies with ties to hostile governments. They're not just gathering intelligence, they're selling American citizens' personal data to our enemies." Marcus stared out the window at the morning pedestrians hurrying to work, ordinary people who had no idea their private lives might be commodities in a global intelligence market. The responsibility felt overwhelming, but he knew Catherine was right. Someone had to expose what quantum dynamics was doing. "If I help you," Marcus said carefully, "what are the risks?" Catherine's expression grew grave. "Significant. If they discover you're working with us, you'll disappear. These people have resources and connections that go far beyond a simple corporate security team. But if we can gather enough evidence, we can shut them down and protect thousands of potential victims." Marcus thought about the surveillance files, the profiles of innocent people, the vast network of data collection that operated in the shadows of everyday life. "What do you need me to do?" Over the next hour, Catherine outlined a plan. Marcus would continue his regular work but use his access to copy files onto specially modified drives that Catherine would provide. He would document the company's organizational structure, identify key personnel, and map their data collection methods. Most importantly, he would look for evidence of financial transactions that could prove the illegal sale of intelligence. "There's something else," Catherine said as they prepared to leave. "We believe quantum dynamics has a source inside the FBI, Someone has been feeding them information about our investigation. That's why I've been operating without backup, using the janitor cover to avoid detection. You and I are the only people who know about this conversation." The paranoia that Marcus had been feeling suddenly seemed entirely justified. If there were traitors inside the FBI, then the enemy was even more powerful and well-connected than he had imagined. Catherine handed him a business card for a local pizza delivery service. "If you need to contact me, call this number and order a large pepperoni pizza. I'll know it's you and arrange a meeting. But be careful, assume every communication is monitored." As they parted ways, Marcus felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. He was no longer just a data analyst who had stumbled onto something disturbing. He was now an active participant in a dangerous game of espionage and counterespionage, where the stakes were measured in lives and national security. When Marcus arrived at Quantum Dynamics that morning, everything looked the same, but his perspective had fundamentally shifted. Every colleague was now a potential threat, every assignment a possible test of his loyalty, every conversation a minefield of hidden meanings. The building itself felt like a predator that had swallowed him whole, and his only chance of escape lay in gathering enough evidence to bring down the entire organization from within. Dr. Kim greeted him with her usual professional smile, but Marcus now noticed the way her eyes lingered on his face, searching for signs of stress or suspicion. She handed him a new encrypted drive with what she described as time-sensitive data requiring immediate analysis. As Marcus accepted the assignment, he realized that the deadliest edge wasn't just about being smarter than his enemies. It was about maintaining perfect composure while carrying secrets that could get him killed. The real challenge wasn't outpacing or outchilling his opponents. It was surviving long enough to expose the truth hidden in the shadows of a corporate facade that masked one of the most sophisticated surveillance operations ever conceived. The encrypted drive that Dr. Kim had given Marcus contained files that made his previous discoveries seem insignificant. This wasn't just surveillance data. It was operational intelligence for active missions. The files detailed ongoing efforts to manipulate social media trends, influence local elections, and even trigger specific behavioral responses in targeted individuals through carefully crafted misinformation campaigns. Marcus found himself looking at the blueprint for psychological warfare being conducted on American soil. One file, labeled Operation Mindbridge, outlined a plan to use social media algorithms to increase political polarization in swing districts during the upcoming midterm elections. Another, Project Whisper, detailed how they were using deepfake technology to create compromising videos of business leaders and politicians who had opposed certain foreign policy initiatives. The scope was staggering, but what truly chilled Marcus was the clinical detachment with which these operations were planned. The files referred to targets as subjects and calculated the emotional and psychological damage they would inflict as if they were analyzing quarterly profit margins. As Marcus carefully documented these discoveries, using the modified drives Catherine had provided, he began to understand the true scale of what they were fighting. Quantum Dynamics wasn't just a surveillance company. It was a private intelligence agency that sold its services to anyone willing to pay, regardless of their intentions or the harm they might cause. The breakthrough came when Marcus discovered a client database hidden within the project-looking glass files. The list read like a who's who of international bad actors, shell companies linked to organized crime syndicates, front organizations for hostile foreign governments, and even terrorist financing networks. Quantum Dynamics wasn't just collecting intelligence. They were empowering the enemies of democracy and human rights. But it was the domestic client list that truly shocked Marcus. Several major corporations were paying for surveillance on their competitors' employees and customers. Political action committees were purchasing detailed psychological profiles of voters in key districts. Even some law enforcement agencies were using quantum dynamics services to circumvent legal restrictions on domestic surveillance. Marcus was so absorbed in copying these files that he almost missed the soft footsteps approaching his workstation. He quickly minimized the windows and pulled up his assigned project just as Dr. Kim appeared beside his desk. "Working late again, Marcus?" she asked, but her tone carried an edge that hadn't been there before. "Just trying to catch up," Marcus replied, hoping his voice sounded normal. "This sentiment analysis is more complex than I initially thought." Dr. Kim studied his screen for a long moment, then pulled up a chair beside him. Marcus, I want to be direct with you. Your work has been exceptional and we're considering you for a promotion, but with greater responsibility comes greater discretion. She leaned closer, and Marcus caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something sharper, the metallic edge of barely controlled tension. Some of our projects require absolute confidentiality. We need to know that we can trust you completely. Marcus met her gaze, fighting to keep his expression neutral. I understand. I signed the confidentiality agreement when I started. Agreements are just paper, Dr. Kim said softly. Real loyalty goes deeper. It's about understanding that some knowledge carries a price, and that price includes the safety of people you care about. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. They knew he had been digging, and they were warning him to stop. But they weren't ready to eliminate him yet. They still needed to determine how much he had learned and whether he had shared that information with anyone else. I appreciate your confidence in me, Marcus said carefully. What would this promotion involve? Dr. Kim smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Access to our most sensitive projects, client consultation, international travel. It's quite lucrative. We're talking about tripling your current salary. The offer was a test, Marcus realized. If he accepted too eagerly, they would know he was hiding something. If he refused, they would become suspicious. He needed to find the perfect balance of interest and caution. That sounds incredible, Marcus said, allowing genuine excitement to color his voice. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Soon, but first there's a probationary period. We need to be absolutely certain about your commitment to the company. Dr. Kim stood, smoothing down her skirt. Think about it, Marcus. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime, but remember, opportunities like this don't come around often, and they can disappear just as quickly as they appear. After she left, Marcus sat in silence for several minutes, processing the conversation. They were trying to buy his silence with money and opportunity, but the underlying threat was clear. He had reached a critical juncture, either commit completely to their organization or face the consequences of his curiosity. That night, Marcus used the pizza delivery number to contact Catherine. They met at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, a place where they could speak freely without worrying about sophisticated surveillance equipment. "They're on to me," Marcus said without preamble, sliding a coffee cup between his hands to stop them from shaking. "Not completely, but they know I've been looking at things I shouldn't." Catherine's expression grew grim. What kind of pressure are they applying? Marcus described the promotion offer and Dr. Kim's barely veiled threats. Catherine listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification about specific details. "They're trying to determine your value as an asset versus your risk as a liability," she said finally. "The promotion offer is designed to test your loyalty. If you accept, they'll give you access to even more sensitive information while watching your every move. If you refuse, they'll know you're not fully committed to their organization." "So what do I do?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, staring out the diner window at the empty parking lot. "We're close to having enough evidence to move against them, but we need one more piece, proof of financial transactions with foreign entities. If we can demonstrate that they're taking money from hostile governments, we can invoke national security statutes that will shut them down immediately." "Where would I find that information?" "Their accounting system. But accessing that will require the kind of clearance that only comes with the promotion they're offering you." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "You want me to accept their offer?" "It's dangerous. If they discover what you're really doing, there won't be time for an extraction. But without that financial evidence, they'll simply relocate their operation and continue their work from another location." The weight of the decision pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. Accepting the promotion would mean deeper integration into an organization that represented everything he opposed. But refusing might be the only way to gather the evidence needed to stop them. "There's something else," Catherine continued. "We've identified their source inside the FBI. It's someone high enough in the hierarchy to access our investigation files. That means our operation has been compromised from the beginning." Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. "Are we walking into a trap?" "Possibly, but we might also have an advantage they don't know about. Our source has been feeding them information about a fictional investigation. We've been running a parallel operation that he doesn't know exists. Everything he's shared with them has been carefully crafted to make them believe they're safe." The complexity of the deception was staggering. Marcus was now part of a multi-layered intelligence operation where truth and fiction were so intertwined that distinguishing between them required constant vigilance. "If I accept the promotion," Marcus said slowly, "how long do I have before they expect me to prove my loyalty by participating in their operations directly?" Catherine's expression grew even more serious. "Not long. Based on our intelligence, they're planning something big for the midterm elections next month. Once you're promoted, you'll likely be assigned to work on that project." The implication was clear. Marcus would have to choose between maintaining his cover and participating in an operation designed to undermine American democracy. The deadliest edge wasn't just about outsmarting his enemies. It was about maintaining his humanity while working alongside people who had abandoned theirs. As they prepared to leave the diner, Catherine handed Marcus a small device that looked like a typical smartphone charger. "This will create an encrypted backup of any computer you plug it into. But use it carefully. If they detect unauthorized data transfers, they'll know immediately." Marcus pocketed the device, feeling its weight like a stone. Tomorrow, he would return to Quantum Dynamics and accept Dr. Kim's promotion offer, knowing that every step deeper into their organization brought him closer to a confrontation that would determine not just his own fate, but the safety of thousands of innocent people whose lives had become pawns in a shadow war fought with information instead of bullets. The coffee in his cup had grown cold, but Marcus barely noticed. He was calculating odds, planning contingencies, and preparing for a level of deception that would test every skill he had ever developed. The shadows were closing in, but he was learning to navigate in darkness. Marcus arrived at Quantum Dynamics the next morning with his decision made. When Dr. Kim asked about the promotion offer, he expressed enthusiasm tempered with appropriate caution. Exactly the response of someone who suspected something, but wasn't certain enough to refuse a life-changing opportunity. "I'm honored by the offer," Marcus told her, maintaining eye contact. "When would I start?" Dr. Kim's smile seemed genuinely pleased. "Immediately. Your new office is on the 15th floor, and you'll be working directly with our strategic operations team." The 15th floor was a revelation. Unlike the open workspace where Marcus had spent his first month, this level was divided into secure offices with reinforced doors and card reader access. The windows were tinted so dark that the outside world appeared as shadowy outlines, and the air hummed with the sound of sophisticated electronic equipment. Marcus's new supervisor was a man named Director Vincent Hayes, a silver-haired executive with the bearing of someone accustomed to wielding significant power. His office was spartanly decorated, except for a collection of military medals in a display case and photographs that showed him shaking hands with various world leaders. "Welcome to the real Quantum Dynamics," Hayes said, gesturing for Marcus to take a seat. "Everything you've done up to this point has been preliminary assessment. Now we can discuss what we actually do here." Over the next hour, Hayes outlined an organization that was far more sophisticated and dangerous than Marcus had imagined. Quantum Dynamics operated as a private intelligence agency, with clients spanning from multinational corporations to foreign governments. They provided services ranging from traditional espionage to what Hayes euphemistically called information architecture, the systematic manipulation of public opinion through data-driven psychological operations. "The world has changed," Hayes explained, his tone conversational but his eyes watchful. "Traditional warfare is obsolete. Modern conflicts are fought with information, and the side with the best data wins. We help our clients achieve their objectives without firing a single shot." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, projecting the demeanor of someone who was impressed rather than horrified. "It's more complex than I realized. What would my role be in these operations?" "You'll be working on Project Democracy Shield," Hayes said, pulling up a classified presentation on his computer. "It's our most ambitious domestic operation to date." The presentation that Hayes showed Marcus was a detailed plan to influence the upcoming midterm elections through targeted misinformation campaigns. Using the behavioral profiles they had gathered, Quantum Dynamics intended to identify key voters in swing districts and expose them to carefully crafted false narratives designed to suppress turnout or change voting preferences. The operation involved creating thousands of fake social media accounts, producing convincing but false news stories, and even organizing AstroTurf protests to create the appearance of grassroots political movements. The sophistication was breathtaking. They had mapped the psychological vulnerabilities of specific demographic groups and designed propaganda to exploit those weaknesses with surgical precision. The beauty of the system, Hayes continued, is that it's almost impossible to detect. Each individual piece appears authentic, and the cumulative effect looks like organic political discourse. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the election will be over. Marcus fought to keep his expression neutral while his mind raced. This wasn't just surveillance or even ordinary espionage. It was a direct attack on the foundation of democratic government. The scale of the operation suggested months of preparation and millions of dollars in funding. "Who's funding this?" Marcus asked, trying to sound professionally curious rather than alarmed. Hayes's smile grew thin. "That's need-to-know information, and you don't need to know yet. What matters is that our client has specific objectives, and we have the tools to achieve them." Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into his new role while carefully documenting everything he could access. His position on the strategic operations team gave him unprecedented insight into quantum dynamics activities, but it also placed him under constant scrutiny. His office was equipped with sophisticated monitoring equipment that tracked his computer activity, recorded his phone calls, and even analyzed his facial expressions for signs of stress or deception. Marcus learned to work under the assumption that every action was being evaluated, every keystroke logged, every conversation analyzed for hidden meanings. The key breakthrough came when Marcus discovered that his new access level allowed him to view the company's financial records. Working late one evening, he used Catherine's encrypted device to copy the accounting files that showed a complex web of international money transfers. The financial trail was damning. Payments flowed into quantum dynamics from shell companies registered in countries known for harboring hostile intelligence services. The amounts were staggering, tens of millions of dollars that clearly indicated state-level sponsorship rather than ordinary commercial contracts. But as Marcus dug deeper into the financial records, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. Among the domestic payments was a recurring transfer from an account registered to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Catherine's own department. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Either Catherine was the traitor she had warned him about, or the corruption inside the FBI ran so deep that her own unit had been compromised without her knowledge. Either way, Marcus realized he was completely alone in a hostile environment with no reliable backup. As he sat in his darkened office, staring at the evidence of betrayal on his computer screen, Marcus understood that the situation was far more dangerous than he had imagined. If Catherine was working for quantum dynamics, then his every move had been anticipated from the beginning. If she was innocent, then the enemy knew everything about the FBI's operation and was likely setting a trap. Marcus's contemplation was interrupted by the sound of his office door opening. Director Hayes entered, accompanied by two men Marcus had never seen before, both wearing the kind of understated but expensive clothing that suggested professional security operators. "Working late again, Marcus?" Hayes asked, his tone pleasant but his presence ominous in the darkened office. "Just reviewing the Democracy Shield materials," Marcus replied, casually minimizing the financial records on his screen. "It's a fascinating project." Hayes moved closer, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "I'm sure it is. You know, Marcus, loyalty is a precious commodity in our business. We invest heavily in people we trust, but we also monitor that investment very carefully." One of the security operators moved to block the door while the other positioned himself behind Marcus's chair. The message was clear. This conversation would continue until Hayes was satisfied with the answers. "I've been reviewing your work," Hayes continued, settling into a chair across from Marcus's desk. "Your analytical skills are exceptional, but I've noticed some interesting patterns in your computer usage. You've been accessing files outside your assigned projects." Marcus felt his heart rate spike, but years of poker playing had taught him to maintain composure under pressure. "I learn better when I understand the broader context. I hope that's not a problem." "Not necessarily. Curiosity can be valuable as long as it's directed appropriately." Hayes leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But unauthorized access to financial records suggests a different kind of curiosity, the kind that can be very problematic for everyone involved. The game was up, Marcus realized. They knew exactly what he had been doing, and this conversation was likely his last chance to convince them that he was salvageable rather than expendable. "I was trying to understand the scope of our operations," Marcus said, allowing a note of genuine excitement to enter his voice. "The financial scale is impressive. This is obviously much bigger than a typical corporate intelligence operation." Hayes studied Marcus's face for a long moment, then gestured to one of the security operators. The man stepped forward and placed a tablet on the desk, displaying a detailed dossier with Marcus's photograph and personal information. "Marcus Chen," Hayes read from the tablet. 28 years old, computer science degree from University of Washington, unemployed for 6 months before joining Quantum Dynamics. Parents deceased, no siblings, minimal social connections. The perfect profile for someone who might be vulnerable to recruitment by hostile intelligence services. The implication was clear. They suspected Marcus was working for someone else, but they weren't certain who. This interrogation was designed to determine whether he was a spy, a potential asset, or simply a security risk that needed to be eliminated. "On the other hand," Hayes continued, "someone with your background and skills could be invaluable to our operations, assuming we can trust you completely." Marcus recognized the moment for what it was, a final test that would determine his fate. The Deadliest edge wasn't just about outsmarting his opponents. It was about convincing them that their assumptions about his motivations were wrong while hiding his true allegiances until he could complete his mission. "I want to be part of something important," Marcus said, meeting Hayes's gaze directly. "What do I need to do to prove my commitment?" The smile that spread across Hayes's face was both pleased and predatory. "I'm glad you asked. Tomorrow, you're going to help us send a message to anyone who thinks they can interfere with our operations. It's time you learned what we do to people who threaten our organization." As the security operators escorted Marcus from the building that night, he understood that he had crossed a line from which there might be no return. Tomorrow would bring a test that would force him to choose between maintaining his cover and preserving his humanity. The shadows had closed in completely, and the only way out led through darkness that might consume him entirely. Marcus barely slept that night, his mind racing through possible scenarios for what Hayes had planned. When he arrived at Quantum Dynamics the next morning, he was escorted not to his usual office, but to a secure conference room on the 20th floor, a level he hadn't known existed. The room contained sophisticated communication equipment and wall-mounted screens showing real-time surveillance feeds from various locations around the city. Hayes was already there, along with several other executives Marcus had never seen before. Their faces carried the hard-eyed look of people accustomed to making decisions that affected lives and nations. "Today, you'll observe an operational demonstration," Hayes announced without preamble. "A journalist named David Chen has been investigating our organization. Despite our efforts to discourage his inquiry, he's scheduled to publish an article tomorrow that could compromise several ongoing operations." Marcus felt his stomach clench as he recognized the name. David Chen was a respected investigative reporter who had exposed several major corruption scandals. The fact that they shared a surname was purely coincidental, but Marcus couldn't help feeling a personal connection to the man whose life was apparently in danger. "What kind of demonstration?" Marcus asked, hoping his voice sounded steady. Hayes gestured to one of the screens, which showed surveillance footage of a man leaving a downtown apartment building. "Mr. Chen believes he's safe because he's been careful about traditional security precautions. He varies his routes, checks for physical surveillance, and uses encrypted communications. But he doesn't understand the scope of modern information warfare." The demonstration that followed was a masterclass in psychological manipulation and technological intimidation. Using their network of surveillance resources, Quantum Dynamics tracked David Chen's movements throughout the morning, but more insidiously, they began to alter his digital environment in subtle ways. Marcus watched in horror as they manipulated Chen's smartphone to display increasingly disturbing notifications. Fake news alerts about violence against journalists appeared in his news feed. Social media accounts he followed began posting threatening messages that seemed to be directed at him personally. Even his GPS navigation system was compromised to route him past locations where quantum dynamics operatives had staged threatening scenarios. A man following him too closely, a vehicle that seemed to appear wherever he went. The beauty of this approach, Hayes explained as they watched Chen's stress levels rise through biometric monitoring from his fitness tracker, is that the target's own paranoia becomes our weapon. We don't need to make actual threats, we just need to make him believe he's in danger. The psychological assault escalated throughout the morning. Chen's email was flooded with messages from fake whistleblowers claiming to have information about his investigation, each designed to lead him into potentially compromising situations. His apartment building's security system was hacked to randomly trigger alarm sounds. Even his coffee shop loyalty card was compromised to display error messages that suggested his personal information had been stolen. By noon, the surveillance feeds showed Chen sitting in his car, hands shaking as he tried to call his editor. But Quantum Dynamics had anticipated this move. They intercepted and rerouted his calls to numbers they controlled, where operators posed as his colleagues and urged him to abandon his investigation for his own safety. "This is psychological warfare," Marcus said, unable to keep the revulsion from his voice. "This is modern conflict resolution," Hayes corrected. "No violence, no direct threats, no laws broken, just information manipulation that achieves our objectives while maintaining plausible deniability." The final stage of the demonstration was the most chilling. Using deepfake technology, Quantum Dynamics created a video that appeared to show Chen accepting bribes from foreign agents. The video was sophisticated enough to pass casual inspection, and they demonstrated how it could be instantly distributed across social media platforms to destroy Chen's credibility if he proceeded with his article. "The choice is his," Hayes said with satisfaction. "Abandon the investigation and continue his career, or publish his article and watch his reputation be destroyed by evidence of corruption that will appear completely authentic." Marcus realized this was more than a demonstration. It was a recruitment test. They were showing him the full scope of their capabilities while evaluating his reaction to methods that crossed every ethical boundary he could imagine. But as Marcus watched the screens showing David Chen's increasing distress, something crystallized in his mind. He had spent weeks gathering evidence of quantum dynamics crimes, but he had been thinking like an investigator rather than an operative. The Deadliest edge wasn't just about collecting information. It was about using that information at the precise moment when it could have maximum impact. "Impressive," Marcus said, forcing admiration into his voice. "How do you coordinate all these different systems?" Hayes seemed pleased by the question. "Central Command Protocol. Everything routes through our primary server, which integrates data from all our surveillance networks and operational tools." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, filing away this crucial piece of information. If he could access that central server, he might be able to not only gather the evidence Catherine needed, but also disrupt their operations simultaneously. "I'd like to learn more about the technical architecture," Marcus continued. "Could I get access to review the system specifications?" "Eventually," Hayes said. "First, you need to demonstrate your commitment to our methods. I want you to compose the email that will be sent to Mr. Chen's editor, explaining why the investigation is being terminated." The request hit Marcus like a physical blow. They wanted him to actively participate in the psychological destruction of an innocent journalist. This was the moment of truth. Comply and become complicit in their crimes, or refuse and confirm their suspicions about his loyalty. Marcus stared at the screen showing David Chen, who had pulled over and was sitting with his head in his hands, overwhelmed by the coordinated assault on his peace of mind. The sight filled Marcus with a cold fury that cut through his fear and uncertainty. "I need a moment to think about the right approach," Marcus said, moving toward the computer terminal they had indicated. But instead of composing the email Hayes had requested, Marcus used his access to initiate the emergency protocol Catherine had taught him. He opened a secure channel and transmitted every piece of evidence he had gathered, along with real-time intelligence about the operation currently targeting David Chen. The response was immediate. Marcus's computer screen flickered and then a new message appeared. "Federal agents inbound, maintain position." Marcus looked up to see Hayes watching him with growing suspicion. "Having trouble with the email?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. "Just making sure I get the tone right," Marcus replied, but he could see in Hayes's eyes that the game was over. Hayes reached for his phone, but before he could make the call, the building's fire alarms began blaring. Emergency lighting activated, and automated voice announcements instructed all personnel to evacuate immediately. The chaos that followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Federal agents poured into the building from multiple entrances, while quantum dynamics security teams attempted to destroy evidence and evacuate key personnel. The 20th floor became a battlefield of competing priorities, law enforcement trying to preserve evidence while corporate operators tried to eliminate it. Marcus found himself caught in the middle of a coordinated law enforcement operation that had clearly been planned for months. Catherine appeared in the conference room, now wearing FBI tactical gear and directing a team of agents who moved with military precision. "Are you hurt?" she asked, quickly checking Marcus for injuries while her team secured the room. "I'm fine, but they were torturing that journalist psychologically. We need to stop the operation against David Chen." Catherine spoke rapidly into her radio, coordinating with other teams to identify and neutralize the various systems quantum dynamics was using to target Chen. Within minutes, the psychological assault was terminated, and Chen was contacted by real FBI agents who explained what had been happening to him. As federal agents arrested Hayes and his associates, Marcus learned the full scope of the operation Catherine had been running. She had indeed been working with a parallel FBI task force that operated outside normal channels specifically because they suspected high-level corruption within the Bureau. The evidence Marcus had gathered over the past weeks proved to be the final piece needed to unravel an international intelligence operation that had been selling American secrets to hostile governments, while simultaneously undermining democratic institutions through sophisticated disinformation campaigns. But the victory came with a sobering realization. Quantum dynamics had been just one node in a much larger network of private intelligence agencies that operated in the shadows of legitimate government and corporate activities. The organization Marcus had helped expose represented only a fraction of the threat posed by the privatization of intelligence operations. "This is the beginning, not the end," Catherine explained as they watched the last of the quantum dynamics executives being led away in handcuffs. "There are dozens of similar operations running right now, and some of them are probably already adapting their methods based on what happened here today." Marcus understood that his life had been permanently changed by his experience inside quantum dynamics. He had learned to navigate in a world where information was both weapon and shield, where truth and deception were tactical choices rather than moral absolutes, and where the deadliest edge belonged to those who could maintain their humanity while operating in the shadows. As he walked out of the quantum dynamics building for the last time, Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned. Outsmarting his enemies had required more than intelligence. It had demanded the ability to think several moves ahead while maintaining perfect composure under pressure. Outpacing them had meant moving faster than their ability to adapt to his actions. And outchilling them had required a coldness that allowed him to function normally while carrying secrets that could destroy lives. But perhaps the most important lesson was that the deadliest edge wasn't just about defeating enemies. It was about preserving the values and principles that made victory worthwhile. The secrets of the shadow world were seductive and dangerous, offering power to those willing to abandon their conscience. The real challenge was learning to fight monsters without becoming one yourself. 6 months later, Marcus testified before a congressional committee investigating the privatization of intelligence operations. His testimony helped establish new regulations governing surveillance activities and led to the creation of oversight mechanisms designed to prevent future abuses. David Chen's article about quantum dynamics won a Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism, but more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about privacy rights and the need for transparency in the intelligence community. Marcus never returned to data analysis. Instead, he accepted a position with Catherine's FBI task force, using his hard-won expertise to identify and expose other organizations that operated in the gray areas between legitimate business and criminal conspiracy. The shadows would always be there, but now Marcus knew how to navigate them without losing himself in the darkness. The deadliest edge belonged to those who could see clearly in the dark while keeping their moral compass intact, and Marcus had learned to wield that edge with the precision of someone who understood that the price of freedom was eternal vigilance against those who would exploit it for profit. The secrets of the shadow world were dangerous knowledge, but in the right hands, they became tools for protecting the innocent and preserving the democratic values that made such protection necessary. Marcus had discovered that the most sophisticated weapon in the information age was an unwavering commitment to truth, wielded by someone brave enough to risk everything to defend it.